Hello, and welcome to the grand opening episode of Cream Soda Revolutions. That is episode number 1. To begin, because this is the inaugural episode, I'm going to run through the game plan real quick so that you guys know how the podcast is going to work. I'm going to be doing 2 things each episode in this podcast. The first is talking about an album or an EP that I've listened to, specifically ones that I like, because I don't want to say a lot of negative things about something that someone's put so much heart and work into. These are the album stories. The second thing I want to talk about is just music in general, whether that's the industry, different genres, news, or even my personal experiences. These are the music geeks. Alright, let's get started then. So to start, I want to talk about an album that I know very well. It's an album that is definitely in my top 5 albums of all time, if not top 3, and that is the album After the Disco by Broken Bells. This is an alternate rock, I guess, indie, some disco, some space rock. It's kind of where rock and pop kind of combine. And it has some really, really sweet sounds, really sick songs. Just a great album. So I'm going to go through the songs individually really quick. Just a couple sentences about each song. And then later I'll go over any songs in particular that I feel warrant additional discussion. So we'll start with the first song, A Perfect World. It's the longest song on the album. It's the longest song that Broken Bells have ever put out, unless there's something that I've never seen before. And this song is great. Now, there's a quick little story about the making of this song, and that is that they had 2 different versions. It was basically the same song, but they had 2 different feels, different drum beats, different bass line, I think, slight variation on the melody, and they didn't decide. They couldn't decide. Which one to choose. So they ended up using both. The song begins with one version, and then the song ends with the other version, and it's perfect. It really embodies, in my mind, this sort of sunset feeling, where the first part is the sun rising and it's the excitement and the anticipation of the new day, and then by the end the sun has risen in the sky and it's kind of almost a down to business sort of vibe, where it's like, okay, now we're gonna get started. The second song, After the Disco, is one of my absolute favorite songs ever. Ironically, it's the most disco song on the record. Great beat to it, infectious melody, Bee Gees-esque vocals in the chorus, which works so well. Great track. Next song is Holding On for Life. This was the most popular single off of the album. It's a ballad. It has a couple of sounds in it that I really didn't anticipate. Like there's a spacey sort of portamento synth sound. Portamento meaning it glides. And you'll really only pick it up at the beginning and then a couple parts during the song, but it fits it really well. There's a really cool music video. You guys should definitely check it out. And its music video is part of this short film that uses a couple songs in the album. This one, and then the 10th song in the album, The Angel and the Fool. Really cool short film, definitely worth checking out. It has Kate Mara and some guy. I recognize his face, but I don't recognize his name. Oh, it's killing me. I'll probably leave a link to him somewhere in the dump. Anywho, it's the first ballad on the song. Great track, really good track. It really deserved to be the most popular song on the album. Next, Leave It Alone. This is the next ballad, and it's a little weird that they have 2 ballads in a row, but you gotta understand, Holding On for Life is only just a ballad. It's around 90-ish beats per minute. Leave It Alone is a true ballad. This is the first song that really makes fantastic use of the choir that they hired to record with them on this album. Second longest song on the album, second longest song that I've ever heard from them. Great track, lots of emotion in this track, and it's open where it needs to be, and it has sound where it needs to. Very well done. Next, The Changing Lights. This is probably my second favorite song on the album. It's really difficult for me to make a decision between this one and After the Disco. Amazing. Amazing vocals, amazing melody, really cool drum beat using the tom toms. Great track, great track. Next, Control. Control is the first one on the album that, in my opinion at least, really channels their previous self-titled album. Maybe Holding On for Life, but Control is the song in this album that very well could have been on their previous album. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's cool. It's quirky. It has a very almost like sassy meaning to it and lyrics, sorry. Cool track. I mean, I'm saying that about all of these. Control, I'd say, is probably the one song on the album that makes you really think, oh shit, they went there. Next, Lazy Wonderland, a much needed break from the seriousness, almost the serious yet sassy yet total attitude diva sort of feel from Control. Lazy Wonderland is carefree. It's a little quiet. It works. Much needed break. Great choice to put in within the album as a whole. You know, like if you're listening through the album, and I always like listening through an album from top to bottom, it provides a much needed break. Next song, Medicine. In my opinion, probably one of the weakest songs on the album. It's still pretty cool. Medicine is probably the, as far as song structure is concerned, the most like the previous album. Control is the most for sound, but Medicine is the most for structure. They don't at all mind throwing in like it's a 4/4 song, but they don't at all mind throwing in like a 2/4 bar if it fits the melody, which is I guess something that you have to adjust to a little bit, but it doesn't really take away from the track. It doesn't add a huge amount to it, but it doesn't take it away anything from it. It's kind of there. Again, probably the weakest track on the album. Still pretty cool though, I have to say. And if the weakest track on the album is still pretty good, that does mean something, you know. Next, No Matter What You're Told. Cool bass line. Vocals are a little weak on this one. The lyrics are okay, but the vocals are lacking a bit on this track compared to previous tracks. This is probably the least, or no, not the least, the most rock of any of the tracks on this album. The most just pure rock. Like there's if almost none, if not no synth on it. There's guitar, there's bass, drums, very very rock inspired. Next, The Angel and the Fool, the real ballad, the quiet, emotional ballad on the track. What I like about The Angel and the Fool is it's meaningful in the lyrics without looking like, hey, look at me, I'm meaningful, which is difficult to do. Not a lot of songs turn out meaningful without looking like they're trying to be meaningful. Cool song. Probably one of my least favorite tracks on the album, only because I'm personally not really into quiet ballads. But I will say the 3 minute and 15-second running length is a godsend to this track. If this was like a 6.5 minute track, I don't know if I could stand listening to the whole length. Like they definitely understood, okay, it's the slow song at the end of the album, but we can really only have it be this long. Finally, we have The Remains of Rock and Roll. It's the only song on the album in three, which is a little interesting. It's a little bit of a curveball, but it's a cool, like almost a waltz. Not quite the right tempo for a waltz, but almost a waltz. Very, if A Perfect World is the sun rising in the sky, The Remains of Rock and Roll is the sun setting and everyone getting ready for a new night of excitement and partying and drinking and doing dumb stuff and making bad decisions. And it accomplishes that while being both, yeah, man, let's have fun, sort of carefree, while also implying this sort of maybe there's a problem with us doing this so much, or at least a problem with me doing this so much. But that's the album. It's the album as a whole. It is 40 some odd minutes long, and now I'm gonna go over somewhat quickly all of the the tracks that I feel deserve a little bit more focus. Okay, so I want to mention A Perfect World one more time, the first song. I did mention the story behind making it, how they had two different versions of it. What I really like about A Perfect World is the blending of the two. How at about 4.5 minutes into the song, it it sort of slowly turns from the initial happy-go-lucky sort of version of it to the not more serious, but the more dark sort of version of it, which the song ends on. And the transition is just perfect. Like it isn't sudden, but it isn't drawn out too much. It's very well thought out. It's very refined, and it helps make the track work really well as a 6.5 minute track. First of all, by having the two different versions, and secondly, by making the transition between the two different versions so smooth. Next song that I want to go over more is The Angel and the Fool, the 10th track on the album. The Angel and the Fool, as I mentioned before, is the other song that's in the short film. And I really like how they make this sort of character. They introduce these two characters in the Holding On for Life section, and then they expand on the two characters in The Angel and the Fool. And to go into that, so Holding On for Life is about the singer noticing this girl as he is leaving a club. And it's this girl standing outside, like shivering in the light jacket, basically, that she has. And it's about how she's sort of waiting for a man to come by and sweep her up that she kind of deep inside of her nose isn't going to come. And then they reincorporate the two in The Angel and the Fool, where the girl is the angel and then the singer in Holding On for Life is the fool. And I really thought this was very well done in the music video, but it also kind of works going through the album. And how occasionally you sort of get this feel that there's definitely the feel that the singer is a character progressing through the album. But you almost kind of get this feel that he's encountering different people through the album, and maybe even this girl, the angel, more than once. I wouldn't be surprised if she shows up in Lazy Wonderland, because the Lazy Wonderland is saying that he is lost in this Lazy Wonderland, which from what I can tell just means he got high. Which, I mean, hell, if you're gonna write a song about that, go for it. But I wouldn't be surprised if like the angel is sort of there. Control or medicine could both be about her. No matter what you're told, could also be about her. The only ones that I think really definitely aren't are Leave It Alone and The Changing Lights. And then, of course, the songs before she's mentioned, After the Disco, A Perfect World. But I do like this sort of reincorporation of previous stuff earlier in the album, and then taking that and reincorporating it later in the album, which The Angel and the Fool and Holding On for Life. Maybe not originally that wasn't the intention, but definitely after the short film, that's the feel that I get from it. Absolutely. Last, no, second last one that I want to talk about, The Remains of Rock and Roll, the 11th and final track on the album. I like how the story of the album as a whole, from what they've said and from what I've interpreted from it, it is after the disco. It's the party's over and you're going home, and it's about you leaving the party as well as near the end, sort of your day after the party. Like, I imagine the angel and the fool is the next day, like when he talks to the girl in Holding On for Life again. And like control and medicine, I imagine, are him being like referring to people that he met at the club or the bar or whatever that he was at the previous night, and being like, look, everything was great when we were at the club, but you're not a person that I really want to hang out with now that we're both sober. Definitely in control, pretty well in medicine. I get that vibe. And The Remains of Rock and Roll is him sort of going back into the beginning of the cycle, sort of going to the next party. And I like how there's a couple lines in the track that are talking about him sort of leaving his responsibilities behind and even leaving his friends behind. Like there's a line in the track that says, "It's a small car, but we'll fit inside if we leave our bags behind." And in my opinion, this sort of means two different things. It could mean, okay, they come with you, they do leave their bags behind, and they're leaving all their responsibilities and all their work and everything else behind, and they're just partying, and that's all they're caring about. Or the other thing can be, or the other interpretation that I get is he's sort of trying to get them to leave their old life behind, but they're sort of realizing like, okay, this guy is a problem. And I really feel like that's what the Remains of Rock and Roll is implying. Like, we're just going to the next party, and that's probably not a great thing to keep doing over and over again. And lastly, the last song that I want to talk about a little more in depth, a little more about theme, is Control. I'll go with, because I really like what Control is about. It's about this person who needs to be in control. Great, original, inventive, really out of the box title on that one, I know. But it definitely gives you this feeling that this person is clinging on to stuff because they don't understand how to let go, and they don't understand how to not be in, I don't want to say the word over and over again, but in control. And I feel like the song on either side of it, The Changing Lights and Lazy Wonderland, are sort of the bringing back this idea of the party responsibilities cycle. Because Lazy Wonderland again is him just forgetting everything and getting high or something. And then The Changing Lights beforehand is how he's sort of leaving one person, how he's like, I don't need anything from you, and you're being sort of clingy. So then Control could either be him moving on to the next person that he ran into the night before, or it could be still about the first person, the person in The Changing Lights, and how he could be saying, like, okay, seriously, go away, leave me alone. I don't want to deal with you anymore. And the last thing that I want to mention about this album before I move on is I really like how in the album art for the previous album was, I don't remember if it's Chinese or Japanese, but it's an Asian paper lantern, one of those like spheres that they put like a candle inside. That's it's that as the album art. That's basically the album art, and then it's his broken bells at the top corner. But I like how after the disco, up at the top is that paper lantern sort of poking down into frame. And the main subject in this album's artwork is a naked woman, with her back turned to you. So I think it would be really cool if they release a third album, if they have like a woman's feet poking down from the top or something like that to sort of continue this cycle. I don't know. I just think that'll be a really cool idea. Okay, last thing is I just want to go over the album as a whole. It's very night-timey of an album, which is a little weird because, again, it's supposed to be about going through the day after the party, but the feel is very night-timey. And what I mean by that is there isn't really like a checklist that you can go down, but night-timey songs I'm referring to as the opposite of daytime-y songs. There's a few things that help make it a nighttimey song, but it isn't really like a quantifiable thing. Like it just sort of happens. But big things are lots of ambience, if that's reverb, white noise, that sort of thing. Being in a minor key certainly helps. Having synth sometimes helps, but not always. And having more than just the one vocal track. If you have vocals, for example, in this case, using the choir that they hired to help them record this album, having them be in the track definitely helps make it more of a nighttime track. And most of the tracks on this record are nighttime tracks, and the record as a whole is definitely a nighttime record. So I don't know. I just think that kind of thing's really cool. So whenever I'm on the bus home and it's like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, maybe not so much now, but back in the winter when it was dark out by 5:30, I would put this song on when I was or sorry, this album on when I was riding the bus. Although nowadays, again, it would have to be dark out enough to warrant it, and I'm not out that late anymore. I don't have college courses that late right now, which is nice. Anyways, yeah, so it's a very nighttime-y album. At least the way that I define an album is nighttime-y. And I mean, it's great. It's a great album. It has the same sort of philosophy that Fleetwood Mac had when they were recording Rumors, where with maybe the exception of like Medicine, every track on this album could be a single. Like the only thing keeping A Perfect World from being a single is that it's almost 7 minutes long. The only thing keeping Leave It Alone from being a single is that it's 5.5 minutes long, and even then, it still really could be a single. Medicine's a little too weird for that, Control might be a little too weird for that, and Lazy Wonderland might be a little too weird for that. But they all could have been singles, definitely. And that sort of mindset when you're making an album, like no filler, just songs that are so solid that they could all be singles and they could all be hit singles perhaps is such a good mindset to be in and such a healthy mindset to be in when you're recording an album and when you're writing an album. And After the Disco, I don't know if that's what they were thinking, but that's definitely what the end result feels like. It's an album that is filled with songs that are begging for radio play. Great album. I don't want to put a number on it. I don't want to be the kind of guy who ranks albums by number because music is so subjective a thing. Everyone has such varying tastes in music. So I'm not going to put a number. It's definitely an album that I recommend, although almost every album that I talk about on here is going to be an album that I recommend. I will say sort of stuff that if you like X, you should try Y. If you like artists like Bjork, Death Cab for Cutie, who else? The Bee Gees, a lot of different kind of disco stuff. If you're into any of that kind of stuff, or even if you're into a little more rock kind of stuff, like if you like Foals, again Death Cab, or even Depeche Mode, then I think you should check out Broken Bells, especially the album After the Disco. Their debut album Broken Bells does sound pretty different. It's definitely a different kind of vibe of an album. But yeah, so that is After the Disco. That is my album story. So now I'm just gonna talk about something relating to After the Disco, and this is gonna be my music geek for the week. Kind of like that, music geek for the week. I'm gonna write that down. Anyway, so my music geek for the week is going to be talking about using synthesizers and guitars and knowing when to cut one, when to cut the other, and when to use both. And I want to talk about this because After the Disco does this right. And 1984, the Van Halen album does this right. And it's really this thing of, okay, are you going for more of a pop feel right now, or more of, again, like I just mentioned, more of a nighttime feel right now, or do you want to get balls to the wall? If you want to get balls to the wall, then you use guitar. If you're doing the other things, then you use synth. And the two guys that make up Broken Bells do this super well because one of them's a guitarist and a singer, and the other one is a producer. So the two of them communicate so well together when making, or at least on the final product for this album. I mean, I don't know what their studio in the studio life is like, but the end result of this album, they really do that very well, balancing the programmed synthesizer ness with the guitar more rock oriented mindset. But yeah, so the album does that very well. In each track does that pretty well. They have a bunch of different sounds, but it's still unified. It's a great album. Came out last year as of this recording, 2014, near the beginning of the month, I think, or of the year, I think like February. And I'm really glad that I found this album, and I'm really glad that I listened to this album because again, this has become one of my favorite albums ever. So I mean, I am a little biased towards it. However, I absolutely welcome discussion. If you have opinions on this album, if you also think it's great, if you didn't like some things, if you hated it, please, please, please get in contact with me. I love discussing with you guys, and I love talking about music because I love music, and I love this industry. As wild as it is, I love music and I love the industry and I love everything about it. So my so my final thought for this week is one quick last little thing about the album. If you're still not convinced, I'm going to leave a link to the iTunes page of it below in the dump, so you can preview some of the songs, see if you yourself want to purchase it. Last thing that I want to talk about is if you're going to get this album, absolutely listen to it at night. Absolutely listen to it at night. Listen to it once or twice during the day, but you have to listen to it one time at night. If you live in a city, either go outside or at least look outside. You've got to see the city lights while it's dark out when you're listening to this track. That is absolutely my recommendation. And with that, I am signing off. I am fizzing out because this is Cream Soda. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of Cream Soda Revolutions. It has been half an hour. That's going to be the running length that I'm going to aim for these. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for having a swig of Cream Soda Revolutions. This has been the first episode after the disco. My name is New Yorker. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.